said I wouldn't. I told myself I wouldn't. But I have to. We need to talk about Ghost in the Shell. Oh, guys. I decided to basically self-induce lobotomy for 2 hours and saw the new Ghost in the Shell film. You know, as an adaptation, I'd call it garbage, but that's not fair to garbage. Garbage deserves better. Okay, but before I even get into the original film, guess it's important to kind of talk about Ghost in the Shell as a franchise and my personal history with it. Ghost in the Shell is a massive multimedia franchise which dates all the way back to its beginnings in 1989 with a manga by Shiro Masamune. Fast forward to 1995. You get the groundbreaking animated film directed by Mamoru Oshii, which was highly influential on a ton of filmmakers following, most notably the Wachowski siblings. There is a story that they went to Warner Brothers with a copy of Ghost in the Shell and said, "We want to do this, but for real." And thus cameth The Matrix. So for all of you Matrix fans who've never seen Ghost in the Shell, you should go say thank you to Ghost in the Shell and to Mamoru Oshii and say, "Thank you. We would not have these movies without you." Following after that, there is a lot more media related to Ghost in the Shell. There's an anime series entitled Standalone Complex, which had 2 seasons and a film entitled Solid State Society. There's a sequel to the original film entitled Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, which was directed once again by Mamoru Oshii, and it's amazing if you haven't seen it. And then there was more recently in 2013 another anime series entitled Ghost in the Shell Arise, which was trying to be really more of a prequel to all of this. It dealt with the Major as a younger character, and it too spawned its own movie entitled Ghost in the Shell, the new movie, I believe. And then we culminate in 2017 with the film Dumpster Fire. It's Ghost in the Shell. So my history with Ghost in the Shell. I came to anime in general late in the game. Yeah, I watched Pokemon and Digimon as a kid, but nobody told me it was from Japan. I didn't know it was Japanese, it was all dubbed in English. I just assumed it was part of Saturday morning cartoons. It wasn't until I was in college that I discovered anime as a medium, and that it was this whole thing that I could experience. When I want to experience something, I say, alright, give me some lists. I looked up what were considered some of the greatest anime films. Ghost in the Shell was on every single list. And not only was it on every single list, it was within the top 5. And I went, well, I love science fiction, I love cyberpunk, let's watch Ghost in the Shell. And, it's not the most entertaining of movies, I will say that. The way we think of the word entertaining, I'm not gonna necessarily put Ghost in the Shell on that list, but it is fascinating. It's fascinating because, while there is a plot, I would say the plot makes up about 30, maybe 40% of the movie. The plot exists to drive a set of very interesting characters in a very interesting mood/world, talk about a lot of very interesting philosophy. And that triad of characters, setting/mood/tone, and philosophy is what makes Ghost in the Shell as an entire franchise so very good. The plot ultimately can be considered borderline irrelevant, because it's there to drive that triad of good things and create something that you watch because you're so fascinated by it. After I saw the original film, I was so fascinated by it that I went and sought out all the other media in it, and so I love this franchise. I hold it very near and dear to my heart. But at the same time, I understand that adaptation is a series of very painful cuts and changes. I'm actually a fan of adaptations in general. I am perfectly fine with changes needing to be made. I understand they need to be. If I see an adaptive change or a cut in something with which I'm familiar, if I can understand why it was made, or at least come up with some sort of good reasoning in my head where I go, okay, yeah, I get it, I move on. Even if it's something that I totally love. Maybe I'll say, oh, I wish they'd kept it, but I'm not gonna get incredibly mad about it. And that's only as long as I understand why it was made and it doesn't really impact the storytelling or the kind of core of what the original that's being adapted was. Which is where the problem begins and ends with this new film, in that they just didn't seem to understand what Ghost in the Shell as an entire franchise was. Because they did basically the exact opposite of what made Ghost in the Shell so good. Now, I'm not going to go into any serious spoilers, while I will probably mention specific moments in both the original 1995 film and this 2017 adaptation. I'm going to do my best to not talk about spoilers. If I basically say that there is a triad of things that make Ghost in the Shell so good and so fascinating to watch for so many people, then let's talk about them. Characters.
So what business brings the chief of Section 9 to the Ministry of Foreign Affairs?
I think character is one of the number one reasons I really love Ghost in the Shell. All of the characters of Section 9, not even just the Major, we'll get to her, don't worry, but all of the characters of Ghost in the Shell, especially in Section 9, are so great because they all feel really human. They feel lived in this world. Like, they are a part of it. They don't feel like characters who were created for the sake of this world. And they're very fully realized and defined. Even within the span of just the original film, you get a sense of how this team works together. You understand that the team's basically been around for a while. They've definitely seen some shit, with the exception of Togusa, who, in the 1995 film, is the new man on the scene. He's coming from the police force. He doesn't really have any cybernetic enhancement. He still uses an old-school revolver, which they kind of lovingly tease him about. He's our outsider, or basically the person who, I suppose, can stand in more for the audience at times. And yet, he still works within the confines of the team. In fact, he asks the Major,
"There's something I've wanted to ask ever since I started. Why did you transfer a guy like me from the police force?"
And the Major boils it down to,
It's simple. Over-specialize and you breed in weakness. It's slow death.
So the idea is that Section 9 exists and works so well is because the Major, in conjunction really with Aramaki, but I'm assuming it's the Major who's kind of picking and choosing a lot of people for Section 9, saw the value in differences of opinion, of people, of personality. It's like, get a whole bunch of different people who all think differently, who are all incredibly good at what they do, and take all those different components and turn it on a case. And you'll suddenly realize we can get a lot of shit done, and we can be really good at what we do. And there's also the fact that they all clearly trust each other. But more than that, they all trust the Major. While Aramaki is technically the chief of Section 9, the Major is the one right below him. They all really answer to the Major. Again, in the 1995 film, we meet all of Section 9 and we get a sense of who they all are. We get Chief Aramaki. We understand that he's kind of like a bulldog. He gets into fights with other sections and other higher-ups. We get the Major and all of her existential musings as to what she is, what she will become, what necessarily does it even mean to be human. And we understand her obsession with the case that they deal with in the 95 film, a character called the Puppet Master, and why it kind of puts her on edge so much. And we also get that she's a bit of a risk taker. She jumps off of buildings, she dives when her body weighs 600 pounds, and she needs flotation devices that if they fail, she will literally just sink to the bottom of wherever she's swimming, and that's it, she dies. And we understand why by the end of the film, she makes the choices that she does. We understand Bato, who's basically the Major's right-hand man, who's kind of big and burly and, in my opinion, totally lovable, but he is also very intense. He does his job. He notices when things are wrong with the Major. Basically, he notices when she's emotionally kind of off, where something's bothering her. He may not always understand it, but he's very in tune with how the Major's feeling. Clearly, they've been together a very long time. You get that sense of they've kind of been partners for a while. You understand Togusa, our kind of outsider, as it were, who's coming in as the new guy, but who still really clearly respects this team and wants to be a part of them and understands that they're doing some real good. You understand Ishikawa, who's our amazing hacker. We understand Saito, who's basically an amazing sniper. And you understand they clearly have some past with the Major, even if we don't get the specifics of it. And, by the way, you know them enough that I actually remember their names. Contrast this with the 2017 film, where while we do get some time with Bato, every single other side character in Section 9 is underutilized and ignored, really, for the entirety of the film. They really are basically ignored, with the exception of Bato and some of Aramaki. And even then, it's still disappointing. You had freaking Takashi Kitano as Aramaki, and he's underutilized. How do you cast an actor that good as Aramaki and underutilize him? Because he's so good, and you put him in such a great role, and you barely used him. I don't know how to pronounce the name of the actor who played Bato, but what scenes he was in, I thought he was good. I wanted more of them. Shinhan as Togusa is barely in this film, and I wanted more of him. There's also the fact that he's not a new guy in this team anymore. The entire role of Togusa is basically changed in terms of his dynamic with the team. That was very disappointing. He's still the guy without cybernetic enhancements, because that's given some lip service, but they don't do anything with it. We meet the team, but there's not much else. Ishikawa and Saito might as well not exist in this film, because I think Saito shows up once. Ishikawa's in it maybe twice. Each of them have a grand total of like 3 or 4 bits of dialogue. You don't see why they're on this team or what's the point. You don't really understand what Section 9 is and what they do. And that's kind of the point. You need to understand these characters, how this team works, and what it is they do. Or else, why are we following them? And beyond that, how do they fit within the world? It's a good way to give you world building if you show me a freaking government agency of this world. But the 2017 film doesn't do that. The characters of Section 9 are wholly underutilized. They're basically ignored for the entirety of the film, and so you're already taking out one part of that triad. And then, of course, the pinnacle of my issue with the characters is the Major. Without going into spoilers, oh my god. How do I even talk about how bad the Major is in this? Even if I were to divorce this from the 95 film and not look at it as an adaptation or whatever it is, and try and say this is a film in its own right, the Major is not an interesting character in this film. Besides the fact that the script has totally failed this character, Scarlett Johansson doesn't do anything to help. She speaks in a constant monotone, her face pretty much looks like this for the whole time, and it doesn't do much else. Okay, I understand when you don't have a script that gives you much, but you could at least emote. Because the Major, while being a cyborg, is human. There's a human brain, it's just a mechanical body. You can emote, and even the anime let her emote. And let me tell you, the original film was pretty intense on keeping a very serious tone throughout the whole thing, but it let her emote. She is emotional, she is still a character, and this, there was nothing there. And that's a problem, because the film needs to make you care about the Major because of what it tries to do, and unfortunately, I couldn't have cared less. And that's disappointing, because when I'm usually thinking about the Major, it's all hail the motherfucking queen. I love this character, she's a badass and amazing. And in this film, I was like, shit, she could jump off a building and I wouldn't care. Let her sink to the bottom of the ocean. Except she doesn't in this film. They recreate an iconic scene that involves the Major diving, and it's great in the original film because it gives you a sense of the Major as a character without going into a ton of exposition or anything else like that. She dives, she has a flotation device bring her up. Because her cybernetic body apparently weighs something like 600 pounds, I think is what I remember correctly. It's extremely heavy. She will sink. The idea that she even dives is crazy. It's highly dangerous. Whereas in this film, it's like, no big deal. She swims under there because it's quiet. That's it. Like, there was no point to the scene. It didn't tell me anything about the character. They put it in there because it was in the original, except it had a purpose in the original, because the original had a totally different storyline. It was, like, doing something. There was no point for it in this film. Oh yeah, and by the way, it's Motoko Kusanagi. She is Japanese. She's a Japanese military officer, official, basically, working in a Japanese military organization in Japan. No matter what the 2017 film does, no. I mean, they pretty much just kicked themselves in the ass with that one. And anybody who comes at me going, oh, but she's got purple hair and red eyes, or she looks however she wants, I'm going, her name is Motoko Kusanagi. Okay? She's Japanese. I really don't think I need to say anything more on that, and I'm not going to, because there are far more eloquent discussions about the whitewashing of that character. You don't need me to talk about it. This film also fails on characters that are unique to this film, and those are, well, really the antagonists. If you've seen the promos, you know there's a character who's been labeled as Kuze, who's sort of being listed as the ultimate bad guy. And unfortunately, I can't talk about Kuze without going into major spoilers for both this film and Standalone Complex. Needless to say, the character sucked. He was boring, didn't do justice to the character he was supposedly inspired by. He's just as boring as the Major. I didn't care. Didn't care. I don't think it's entirely Michael Pitt's fault, because I think he tried. He at least gave a more emotional performance than freaking Scarlett Johansson, so, kudos to Michael Pitt, you tried. You tried to make something out of absolutely nothing, and I'll give you credit for that. And other characters unique to this film, they were obvious villains. They were obvious villains from like 30 seconds in, and so it made the film dull. Which goes to setting, mood, and tone. I'm gonna rope plot into here as well, if only because, as I said, in the original 95 film, plot was kind of irrelevant. Plot served the triad. The 2017 film does basically the exact opposite. It tries to really have a plot, and it says, okay, we're just gonna make the triad serve the plot, except we're gonna really screw up the triad, and our plot is gonna suck. There's nothing redeemable about this plot, because it treats the audience like it's stupid. And as an audience, you are not stupid. You can understand what's going on. The 95 film can be seen as confusing because it essentially throws you into the deep end and expects you to swim. It is not going to hold your hand. It's not even going to give you the impression it's going to hold your hand. And I can get how that would turn a lot of people off, which is why I say the 1995 film, if I were to rate it on entertainment level, isn't necessarily high. But the 2017 film isn't entertaining for a completely different reason. It's not entertaining because it assumes, as an audience, you are stupid. That you're not going to understand anything. And so it deliberately tries to make sure that the characters tell you everything you need to know all the time and put it in like the most childish of language. It doesn't even try to act like you might be an adult or you might be an intelligent thinking individual. It assumes you're a dumbass. And it's insulting because the plot ultimately just sucks. It's boring. It's nothing you haven't seen before. And that also goes for the tone, the mood, and the setting. Now, while the 1995 film didn't necessarily, create this Tokyo I'd never seen before, granted, I've never been to Tokyo, I don't know what it looks like. The 1995 film, sure, some of the animation can admittedly look a little dated, but it looks like a city, it looks like a place that's lived in, it looks like a world. I really get the sense this is where people live, this is how they go about their day. Not only that, it does some amazing things with shadow and light, in that it really creates this kind of neo-noir feel. It really wants to create mood more than anything else, and it totally succeeds. This film looks like Blade Runner met Neo Soul from Cloud Atlas and had a CGI splooge baby. And that's about it. It's nothing you haven't seen before. It didn't feel original, it didn't feel inspired in any way. And this is disappointing for me because Rupert Sanders is not a director. I would have thought to have said, I thought his visuals were uninteresting. His last major film that I can think of is Snow White and the Huntsman, and while I'm not going to sit here and say that's one of the greatest films ever made, you won't hear me say it's visually uninteresting. It is a very visually interesting film. He creates some beautiful shots, and I thought if anybody could have taken Ghost in the Shell and translated his beautiful cinematography to screen, he's one of them. I think he really could have done something beautiful. And there are times when the cinematography of this new film is gorgeous. There are times where they really do a good job creating beautiful visuals. A lot of them are shot for shot, ripped from the original, but they translate. And that's about it. And in terms of mood, I never had any tension in this film. I checked my watch 3 times while watching this film, begging for it to end, because there was no mood, there was no tension, there was no sense of atmosphere. I didn't care about the mystery, I didn't care about the characters, I just didn't care. There was nothing about the world that invested me in wanting to know more about it. They talk about this being a world where cyberization and humanity have combined, and I go, well, no, they haven't. You're trying to make it very clear that the Major is a special snowflake, and the only one. So no, they haven't. You haven't earned that opening title card that you put in there. Now, the other film, the 95 film, earned its title card, not only by virtue of the fact that there was a lot more characters who were dealing with cyberization and they really dived into how big of an impact it's had, but because of its plot. That made even more sense. It doesn't make sense in this film. And finally, the philosophy, which really also ties into plot and everything else. Can you see how this triad is so connected?
There are countless ingredients that make up the human body and mind. like all the components that make up me as an individual with my own personality.
The philosophy of the 2017 film doesn't exist. Ultimately, the message of the 2017 film is, humanity is awesome, man! No matter what, we are humans, man! Cool, I've seen that a million times. I didn't need Ghost in the Shell for that. What I wanted out of Ghost in the Shell is a line that comes out of the 95 original.
And where does the newborn go from here? The net is vast and infinite.
Ultimately, the original Ghost in the Shell was challenging your idea of what did make you human. It asked questions like, well, what if a machine could generate a soul? What is the importance of being human at that point? The original 95 film was all about exploring questions, sure, of identity, but more about humanity and technology. And when you push the two of them so far to the point that they've blended and merged, there are a whole new set of questions that come out of that, and they should make you feel uncomfortable. You should be asking questions to the point you're going, ooh, shit. That was what made the 95 film, and obviously the original manga and any subsequent media that came out of Japan at least, so fascinating to so many people. It's part of why we come back to it. We want to ask those questions. We don't necessarily need answers. We want to be able to ask those questions, and we want the media that we are watching to ask them and take us seriously as people who maybe want them to be asked and want to see what they do when they play with those questions. The 2017 film didn't even dare to ask any of those questions. And that is part of where I look at it and go, you did not understand what Ghost in the Shell was about. You tried to make it about a really shitty plot, barely paid attention to your characters, didn't give me any world-building tension or moodiness, and didn't bother with your philosophy. You mouthpiece off some nice pretty lines. The film doesn't do anything with those questions, which is part of what makes it so boring and so insulting for someone who's an audience member, where I go, you're not taking me seriously as an audience to dare to continue on with those questions. You didn't, great, you brought it up, sorta, you mentioned it. You gonna do anything with it? No? Oh, okay. If I were to rate this film on a level of go see it in the theaters, wait for it to stream, or skip it, I would say if you were at all familiar with anything related to Ghost in the Shell, like you've seen the 95 film, or you've seen some of the anime, you've read the manga, any of it, skip this film. It's only gonna make you ill. It's only gonna make you angry. It might just break your heart a little, because you can look at it and see the potential for something that could have been good. I would frankly take that entire supporting cast of Section 9, bring me a new major, give me a much better script, and it could be made. But it wasn't. It wasn't handled well. So skip it. If you know nothing about Ghost in the Shell, you don't know what all the fuss is about, you just want to see a movie, stream this film. Don't pay money to see it in the theater, because the greatest sin of this film, divorced from its adaptation, is that frankly it's boring. It's nothing you haven't seen before, it's not gonna blow your mind. Maybe, if anything else, the film may make people who know nothing about Ghost in the Shell want to go watch the original anime, because it's pretty clear there are moments of brilliance in it, and the moments of brilliance are the visuals that are ripped from the anime. And that's it. And, the fact that they actually cast the side characters well. Ultimately, the 2017 film is a sometimes pretty, but very boring, unoriginal, and uninspired shell. Seek the ghost elsewhere. Ugh.